So welcome back. I hope you enjoyed those songs, and also as we listened to Vicky too. We're going to read the passage in James 1, and Vicky's going to do that for us.
So we are picking up at verse 19 in James 1, and we're finishing the chapter. It says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in the mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world."
Thank you, Vicky. That's okay. That's okay. So, as we said, we're in James 1, starting at verse 19. Who am I going to pick on to actually open our thoughts? I think I'm going to pick on Terry today.
Yes, in the first verse, you must be quick to listen. I don't think it's in our psyche nowadays to spend much time listening. And I think we do read the word at times, and other things after we've read the word crowns into our life, and our mind gets focused on something else. But we need to take the time to listen. Once we've read the word, is God trying to speak to us? We have to give that time for the Lord so that he can transfer to us what he's trying to say to us. But in our busy lives, as we put it, we don't always give the time to listen to what God is saying to us.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, this idea of being quick to listen and slow to speak, because it's really easy, isn't it, to get het up with your own opinion. And that's almost what this is talking about, isn't it? You know, stop and listen. Don't just speak. Don't just talk. And maybe tonight, Mark, every time you ask a question, we're going to sit here for a good 10 seconds listening and thinking before we respond, because it's so easy, isn't it, to jump in with a quick word, to not hear what the other person has said, and to get annoyed and to get frustrated and to get angry, because obviously it goes on, doesn't it, and slow to become angry. It's really easy to get angry when you're not really listening to what the other person's saying, because you hear what you want to hear, not what they're saying. And I don't know, maybe we just need to learn to slow down in everything, to trust God. As it says, God is slow to anger and abounding in love. So we kind of need to be too. The world's way is to be quick to anger, isn't it? You think about everything that goes on in the world. It's a quick argument. Let's argue, let's get in there, as opposed to take the time to listen, to think, and then respond.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and it was great actually, Terry. You looked at it a bit differently than I was thinking, and maybe Martin was thinking. You took it to be that God was speaking, and for us to listen and then not to speak. I automatically thought about actually, do I actually listen to other people, and am I slow to speak? And it's interesting actually. We have a 5-year-old at home who, if you talk to her, she will hear the first thing, and if it's the negative thing, then she goes off on one. But then if you try and say to her, look, just listen to the whole sentence, and actually it's not as bad as you think it might be.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it's actually, she gets angry, can get angry quite easily, especially if things are said which she doesn't want to hear. And that's the same for us, I'm sure, as we grow older. We still are in that habit of actually not really listening to what people are saying, and sometimes get angry with other people because actually we're not really listening to what they're saying, what the words they're using. So that was a good thought there, Terry.
No, that's all fairness, Mark. I was on the same lines as yourself. I know my mum's going to not kill me on this, but she's very much the same. You know you're talking to someone, and you know on their facial expression, they're not really listening to what's being said because she's already trying to work out an answer or what's to be said next. So you go, Mum, what's so-and-so? Oh, it's so-and-so. No, Mum, that's not what I asked.
Yeah.
Oh, wasn't it? What did you ask them? You know, and that's like us, isn't it? You know, sometimes we're asked a question and we pick up, as you quite rightly said, Mark, it's those keywords. Oh, so Mark wants to know how to paint a gate. Well, actually, he didn't want to know how to paint a gate. He wants to know how to get the gate's head. As an example.
Yeah. I think that's so true.
You know, we're quick to give an answer, and it's where that frustration comes into it. Well, I've never asked that. Where did you get that from? Where do I want to go to paint a gate from? And then suddenly what's turned out to be a simple question or a chance of listening, we're getting frustrated because we haven't given them the right answer or whatever, or we've not heard what they said. And before you've known it, what seemed to be such a simple action is now turned into conflict.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's the same, you know, when we pray and actually, you know, Lord, whatever, you know, and is that what God said? Hang on a minute. It always says, you know, wait and listen, absorb and hear what my word is. Oh, so the Lord's telling me actually rush out and do this. Well, no, he's not saying that because we've not spent that time to absorb what the word of the Lord is.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I was reading this and thinking about this, and I wrote down a few notes, and one of the things I wrote down was what matters more to us, what we think or say, or what others think and say, because actually that's the root behind all of this, isn't it? If I really think what you're going to say matters, I'll listen, I'll pay attention. If I don't, then chances are I'm going to be busy doing something else, thinking about, you know, there's... for anyone who watches The Simpsons, and I'm sure not everyone does, there's a clip where Marge is talking to Homer, and a picture in his head is of a monkey bashing cymbals together as she's talking, because he's just not paying attention. And it's a bit like that, isn't it? We just don't pay attention. We get distracted. We don't think it's important enough to...
Well, no, it's true, isn't it? So unsurprisingly, I quite often think about children at this point. And I remember one of the things that I often say to children is that, remember, God gave you one mouth and two ears. You've got to listen more than you speak. And we say it so often to the young people in our groups, don't we, that when they're talking over somebody else, we're trying to say to them, it's, you know, the impression that you give is that what you are saying is more important than listening to the other person. You know, and actually and how often we do that, even to God, you know, the amount of time in my prayer time, I spend all the time yakking, you know, and I'm like, oh, God, about this, and I'm telling him about
just
that.
Just your prayer time, Vicky.
Yeah, you know, literally.
But that's human nature, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely,
You know,
absolutely. And it's about a retraining, isn't it?
Yeah, and certainly over the last few months, you know, where we've had an opportunity where perhaps we haven't had a chance to talk, you know, and that person who's talking doesn't want an answer. Yes. They just want someone, you know, to listen to how they feel or what their experience. They don't want you to say, oh, I've done that. They just want to have a chance to share how they feel or what they've been doing. Not an answer, just someone to share a word with.
There is so much power in somebody feeling heard. And I think that's what you're saying, isn't it? Is that actually sometimes we don't want to be fixed. No. And and actually quite often when we come to God in that moment as well, actually the fact that God does just listen to us yakking on or complaining or crying or whatever it is, that actually for someone to feel heard, that their voice is important, there is so much power in that.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean to say, sometimes I say to Carol, such and such, she said, and she'd say to me, but I told you that already.
Let's not go down
I knew you weren't listening.
Wife ever.
Terry, I don't think you're alone,
No.
and Carol's
No.
alone in that. I'm
I
pretty
don't
sure
think so.
Fiona
Have a
would
little
say
chat
exactly
with
the
Daniel.
same
Your
thing.
mind's focused on something else and you're listening with half an ear.
Yeah, and we're pretty sure Daniel would say the same thing too, aren't we? That Vicky's not listening and that he's told her already.
Yeah, it's that way round. It's that way round.
We just keep quiet, Mark, won't we now?
But again, I think it's looking at, as we move on to that bit about do not become angry easily, because anger will not help you have the right kind of life that God wants. What do we feel that means in our context?
I wasn't just listening in my pause
No,
there.
no, that's a
Yeah,
good
I was
pause.
just thinking, actually, what does that mean about not getting angry? I suppose it's confirming what we think we've heard, and maybe I have to ask that question again. You know, how many times will we think we've heard the answer we want, you know, as an individual, when actually God's actually saying to us, I'm not actually saying, no, do this. Listen to what I'm actually saying and spend that time, absorb and understand the word I'm giving you. It's easy to go off, well, oh, sorry, it's given me the answer, off I go. Well, God's not saying that.
No, I think it's the difference between an emotional reaction and a considered response, isn't it? I mean, I'm not very good at that, by the way. That sounds like, so great. Not at all. I'm very emotionally
I was going to
responding.
come to you in a minute.
But the idea of actually that if you stop and listen and think before you respond, it becomes something much, even if it still is a negative response, it's a much more welcome negative response as opposed to an emotional reaction because of only half listening and...
Well, they always say that in interviews, don't they? Listen to the question. Don't blurt out an answer. Make sure you understood the question. And if you're not sure, ask again.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and just making sure that what you have heard is what you're being asked.
Yeah, for those of you who've done the marriage prep course that was done by Holy Trinity Brompton, I think, there's an interesting section in there where they talk about listening and how to truly listen and to truly be able to respond without getting angry in a disagreement, without responding instantly with, oh, that hurts. They get them to actually repeat back what the other person has said before they do anything. And it's really awkward watching. And, it doesn't work in every situation. But that sense of being able to say it back to them means you've definitely heard it right, and actually even gives you a chance to think about it before you get angry because they've just told you they didn't like your spag bowl or I'm being silly, but something that's really, really upsetting. And so then you can take that time and be slow to become angry, slow to get to that point where disagreement happens, because that's not God's way, is it? God's way is grace and forgiveness and understanding. And as men and women of God, we've got to learn that process. And it's really hard because I want to argue sometimes.
But, we've had this conversation, about prayer time, and I know we said about listening, but it's also making sure we're in the right environment, isn't there? There's no point in having a conversation if the washing machine, not that I know one of those is, but if the washing machine was, churning away or whatever it does,
Spin.
it apparently puts some clothes in, it comes out clean. So I'm sure Julie will tell me there's more to that.
It's a miracle, honestly. It's
but
an
it's finding that
absolute
time, isn't it? Having the TV on, the radio, and all that. So it's not just purely about listening. It's making sure you're in the right environment, the right place, and then there's no chance, hopefully, he says, that you don't hear the correct word.
Well, it's the distractions, isn't it? It's
Yeah, it can be.
removing those distractions to enable our ears to be fully open.
Yeah.